Welcome back to Bring It In with Morgan Campbell. I'm your host, Morgan Campbell. We're recording this on a Monday morning, February 1st, the top of Black History Month. We're going to say rest in peace to John Chaney in a minute. We are also going to give you guys the only Super Bowl preview you need, but I'm not doing this by myself. Again, I have two of the best in the business with me. First up, Meghan McPeak in Washington, D.C. How we doing?
Can't complain. Excited for a new month, the quickest month of the year. And of course, it's Black History Month. I'm doing great.
Perfect. And also in Washington, D.C., and I'm not sure if you guys are getting hit by this snowstorm or not, but the author of 10 books and 11th on the way on Colin Kaepernick, Dave Zirin, how we doing?
Yeah, there's all this strange white stuff on the ground outside my house. I'm just unfamiliar with what it is.
Well, stay safe out there. And we're all inside. Everyone has time to shovel. So the highlight I remember from John Chaney didn't take place on a court. You look at John Chaney, and again, especially in the 1990s when I used to watch a lot of basketball, and I remember seeing this guy. The team was called the Temple Owls, and John Chaney kind of looked like an owl. He had the dark circle around his eyes and that really, really intense glare, and the undone tie and the two top buttons unbuttoned shirt perpetually. Like at the beginning of the game, he looked like he was in the fourth quarter already. And then there was this game against UMass in February of 1994. Dave knows what I'm talking about. Meghan might have Googled it. I don't know if she's alive when this happened. And John Chaney and John Calipari get into it in the news conference. And it was a tough game. It was a really physical game. The referees tried to let the players play. There was a lot of fouling going back and forth. But John Chaney's beef was that Calipari was working the referees to get them to call fouls on Temple, but let UMass play. John Chaney was not happy. So he crashes the news conference, and they go back and forth. And then there's this moment where Calipari leaves the podium. He steps away from the podium. And now, in the words of another legend from North Philadelphia, the poet laureate of that city, Tyreek Trotter, who most people know as Black Thought from The Roots. If you act like you want it, you're going to end up getting it. And John Calipari almost got it that night because John Chaney was making a beeline to the podium where he was ready to wring John Calipari's neck. But what stands out to me is, one, the determination and the dedication, because what he thought he was doing was protecting his players. And this is when I think about John Chaney, like for better or for worse, mostly for better, he did what he thought was best for his players. So he passed away January 29th at age 89 after a long, fulfilling, successful, meaningful life. Dave Zirin, when you think about John Chaney, what comes to mind?
Well, actually, it's the end of that press conference when it was his own players, Eddie Jones and Aaron McKee, who later had great NBA careers,
yes,
who the ones who stepped out and led John Chaney away. It just shows the degree of family that he created at Temple. And that whole conflagration between Chaney and Calipari, I mean, it had all of this symbolic value at the time because John Calipari at the time, he was young, he was slick. Clearly UMass for him was going to be a staging ground for his next job. He was the sort of guy who, if he shook your hand, you're counting your rings afterwards. And John Chaney is somebody who had built Temple Owl basketball. He was the institution. He was the one who was going to stay at Temple no matter what. And so it was like a clash of two very different kinds of college coaches. Now, they later became very good friends, but that moment was a great moment of kind of like two different ways to approach the college game. And that's the way I'm going to remember John Chaney. People knew him as Little John and John Thompson as Big John. And it's hard to believe they're both gone. But who they both were they were institutions, both Johns, at their schools. And they were both people who, to my mind, were really the first big-time people in the 1980s who were talking about the NCAA as a system that exploited young Black men. Mm-hmm. And John Chaney insisted that his players exploit the system right back. and that was his, that's why his players loved him so much, because he was honest with them about the system they were in, and also spoke to them honestly about what they could get out of the system itself. He said to them, look, the NCAA feeds on you, but you have to figure out a way how to feed on it at the same time. And that's why, for all of his gruffness and the like, I mean, people loved him. He reminds me of an old English teacher I once had who I hated and then loved. And then at the end of the year, he said to me, the secret is you never smile at the kids until Christmas, and then they'll love you forever. And that was John Chaney to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's, in these legendary, 5 a.m. practices. And the thing about John Chaney too is, and I remember him so vividly because he comes from an era when I watched a lot more basketball, and he and John Thompson and Nolan Richardson just stood out as these three outstanding, successful Black coaches. Kind of the difference with Chaney being that he didn't have like these superstar recruits. No one came through Georgetown that was on the level of Alonzo Mourning or Patrick Ewing was when those guys came out of high school. He didn't have guys like Arkansas had, like tons of guys going to the NBA. Like Eddie Jones, when he came to Temple, was not, a 5-star recruit. He wasn't working with the Jalen Roses and the Chris Webbers of the world, but he was turning these guys into great players and Elite 8 teams. And if you guys get a chance to read Tyler Ricky Tynes' obituary of John Chaney in the Ringer, because Tyler Ricky Tynes is from the same part of Philadelphia, and he kind of lays out not just what John Chaney meant to college basketball and to Philadelphia, but to North Philadelphia and the neighborhood where Temple is located, and what distinguishes Temple from the other 4 schools in Philadelphia that play big time Division I basketball. Meghan McPeak, John Chaney's a little bit before your time. But his influence spans eras. So when you think of John Chaney, like what stands out to you?
Well, I think you both touched on it. Like you think of the late John Thompson, his, staple was towel over the shoulder. And Morgan, you mentioned with Mr. Chaney, his was the 2 buttons open, tie already undone, and the game hadn't started. So they both had very distinct looks that they always went for. But to Dave's point with the fact that both of them stood up against the NCAA. And I think doing that at a time when you didn't stand up to the system and you didn't push back. They pushed back. And in my opinion, that set the tone for the next generations to come to take advantage as they could. As, Dave mentioned, John Chaney implored his athletes to take advantage the way they were being taken advantage of. And you think of John Thompson when he walked off the court in protest because he looked at what they were going to do with that proposition. And I apologize, the rule number escapes me, but basically the rule was going to put in position where if you did not meet a certain GPA percentage wise, you could not be eligible for a scholarship. And John Thompson realized that a lot of his athletes, including himself, would not be eligible for a college education, even though they were exceptional basketball players. John Chaney did what he had to do, to your point of the John Calipari situation. He was standing up for his players because he knew that the Black players and the Black athletes were taken advantage of, they were pushed back, and they were exploited, and he was not going to stand for it. And it happened in a game, and you saw it with the officiating. And you look back at highlights from that game, and you can see that it was officiated completely different on each side for the players. So you have 2 legends and 2 greats of the game who, at a time when you did not stand up to the system and you did not push back, they pushed back and they pushed the line as far back as they could. And it has had repercussions down the line to this day, not only for the basketball and the NCAA, but as well to the NFL, because players are realizing that they are making the money, they are making the millions for this institution, and they are getting nothing for it. And if it was not for the greats like John Thompson and John Chaney pushing back when it wasn't supposed to happen, I don't think we'd be seeing this pushback now and vocalizing as we have, especially in the last 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, it's amazing, Meghan, how much more publicity and credit there is in being on time than there is in being ahead of your time. Because the Johns, Thompson and Chaney, were clearly ahead of their time. But look who winds up benefiting from following this template, following this trail that those guys blazed, is John Calipari, who works his way up to the University of Kentucky and says, you know what, this is an exploitative system, so I'm not going to play the game. What I'm going to do is just go out and nakedly recruit guys on the one and done basis. Listen, if you want to come here for 1 year and use this as your way station towards the NBA, do it. Do it with me, do it here. I'll get you to where you need to be. We're not going to pretend that this college basketball system is fair. I'm not going to keep you here. I'm not going to tether you to this system. I'm going to give you your freedom because this system is unfair. And who was one of the people first to shine the light on the unfairness of the system was the guy who nearly wrung John Calipari's neck. But that's how it works. It's better to be sometimes on time than ahead of your time. And so that brings us to another generational clash, right? On time versus ahead of your time. On time, always on time. Tom Brady, 43 years old, in his 10th or 11th Super Bowl for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Patrick Mahomes, 25 years old, second Super Bowl in, I think, 3 or 4 pro seasons. Dave, is this his third season or his fourth season?
It's technically his fourth, but he's only played 3.
Perfect. And so here we go. And this is the Super Bowl matchup that marketers love. You have the match of the generations. And you also have a successful, dynamic, likable, personable, relatable quarterback. And then you also have Tom Brady. And so, Dave Zirin, who do you expect to prevail on the field in this battle of this quarterback battle of the generations?
Yeah, let's start with the game. Maybe, just maybe, we are overhyping this Super Bowl. And when I say we, I mean the collective earth. Brady versus Mahomes, and there are all these numbers being thrown around to justify the hype. Like 33, that's the number of Tom Brady's postseason victories. Number 2 on that list, Joe Montana with 16. Amazing. 10 Super Bowl appearances. Second on that list, John Elway with 5. So very impressive career. What an incredible career by Tom Brady. But to me, the only number that matters for this game is 1. And that's the number of games the Chiefs have lost since November 2019 with Pat Mahomes under center. He's just too good. So as much as we want to hype the Brady versus Mahomes, I see Tom Brady and I see the guy who threw 3 interceptions the NFC Championship game, and I see Patrick Mahomes, the person who will not lose. And it's, to me, we're going to be watching the equivalent of playing basketball with your big brother or big sister, where you can try all you want and sweat all you want, but big brother or big sister is just going to take you when they want to take you and finish it when they want to finish it. And in this case, you got to absolutely invert the generations. Patrick Mahomes is big brother.
Absolutely. Not to mention the fact, and this always gets lost when we in the mainstream media, and I try to treat mainstream media like at arm's length these days, because thankfully I'm not in that daily information rat race anymore. But the thing that always gets lost is that the 2 quarterbacks are not playing against each other, right? This is Tom Brady against Kansas City's defense. This is Patrick Mahomes against Tampa Bay's defense. So in that sense, it's not a duel between the 2 of them because they're not facing each other. This isn't like back in the 80s, Michael Jordan versus Dominique Wilkins on the court at the same time, each trying to put up as many numbers as they could. This is 2 different guys trying to solve 2 different defenses. And what we know, like on the field, is that Tom Brady is a tremendously efficient quarterback when he has time to throw, and when he doesn't have time to throw, when he's under pressure, because of the fact that he's 43 years old. And he's a well-preserved 43, but he's still 43. 43 is 43, which means you're slower than 23, which means if you're under pressure, you can't get away, and you're either going to take sacks or make bad decisions. And this is what you see with Tom Brady. This is why you see all these interceptions. And I don't see Patrick Mahomes having that same problem with Kansas City's defense. Tyreek Hill went for 260 something yards last time, and they can find a way to limit him to 100 to 90, but there are too many other weapons on that offense. And with Patrick Mahomes an extra week off to get healthy, I don't think it looks good for Tampa Bay. Meghan, McPeak, what do you think?
I got to go with the young buck on this one, pun intended. I think when you look at, as you said, Mahomes is going up against the Bucs defense, and Tom Brady is going up against the Chiefs defense. And the Chiefs defense is a lot less younger than Tom Brady is and a lot more athletic than Tom Brady is, much like Patrick Mahomes is a lot younger and a lot more athletic. And if the Chiefs can get pressure on the pocket, which they are known to do defensively, one of the hardest defenses to play against and one of the toughest defenses to play against in the NFL, if they can disrupt Tom Brady and not give him time, then this is going to be a very, 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 very long afternoon for Tom Brady at 43. Father Time is undefeated in any sport, in any decade, in any generation. And I think Father Time is going to give a reality check to Tom Brady. If this was a few years ago, I would be one of those people who said, I'm not dumb enough to bet against Tom Brady. But at this point, when you have a defense like Kansas City, I think they are going to disrupt him, and it's going to be a defensive game. I think it's going to be low scoring, but I think Mahomes is going to get his second Super Bowl in as many tries, which is insane to think. And I think he's just more athletic. As one of his teammates said, don't let that old man trot fool you. When he wants to turn the speed on, he can. But I got to give the edge to Patrick Mahomes and Kansas City Chiefs, especially because of that defense.
Yes, and also it's a team sport, and this is what people forget. I'm not going to dismiss the idea of quarterback wins, but they can be overrated because, as Dave keeps pointing out, Tampa Bay is in the Super Bowl in spite of the way Tom Brady played against Green Bay, not because of the way Tom Brady played against Green Bay. And team success is team success. It often says something about the individuals who compose the team, but not always. So if you're going to use like Super Bowl rings or championship rings as the determining factor between who is better, this guy's better because he has more rings. Well, and I use this example all the time because I'm old enough to remember to have stood across the field from Tom Brady as a college football player. That tells you how old he is, because I'm not a young man. But my team beat Tom Brady. Does that make me a better football player than Tom Brady? I have 2 Big Ten championship rings. Charles Woodson has 1. Who's better at football, me or Charles Woodson? No, it's not me, guys, if you needed the spoiler. But Dave, are we like too far gone? And it seems a little bit ridiculous to propose this given how successful Tom Brady clearly is, but are we a little bit too far gone on this Tom Brady worship given the current circumstances?
Well, as a football player, I mean, I understand the worship because the numbers really are just exponentially higher than anyone else who's ever played the position. I mean, when people point out things like Tom Brady's played in the NFC for 1 year and already has many road playoff victories as Drew Brees had in his entire career, or Tom Brady's already won as many NFC championship games as Aaron Rodgers. I mean, you get why people look at him and think this guy is the GOAT. You get why LeBron calls him the GOAT. You get why, all these athletes themselves say, wow, this man's been to 10 Super Bowls. That's something else. But, as you point out, I think the NFC was actually very weak this year and the AFC was particularly strong. And I think Patrick Mahomes is playing a different kind of football. An interesting note on this game, which should make Tampa Bay fans a little bit more hopeful, is that Kansas City doesn't have 60% of its offensive line that it had when it won the Super Bowl last year because of it. They've lost 3 starting offensive linemen, and the Bucs have Shaq Barrett, who is like my son's favorite player, and Jason Pierre-Paul, the man with 7 fingers who still gets at the quarterback like nobody's business. And so that could provide trouble for Mahomes, but I just really do feel like Mahomes is playing a different kind of game than everybody else on the football field. He does things that I have never seen. And I've been watching this for a long time. And I think that is the ultimate X factor. There's no position in team sports more important than the quarterback of a football team. That's the determiner in a way that you don't have in other sports. And I think Patrick Mahomes is honestly just on a different plane than even the great Tom Brady.
Yeah, well, and greatness, let's remember, is you evaluate greatness over the long term. But the Super Bowl is one game. And what it takes to win the Super Bowl is to play the best on this one game. And the circumstances of this game do not care about your resume. Now, you make a great resume by doing well in a lot of these games, but the game is the game. It's an independent event. So the things that have made Tom Brady a great quarterback over the long haul are tied to the fact that he's not super athletic, right? So he's never had to depend on skills that diminish with age. Whereas Mahomes, when he's 43, will he be playing like he is now? I doubt it, because you get that old, you lose a couple miles an hour off the fastball, you lose a little bit of that mobility. But Brady, those weren't things he ever depended on anyways. As he got older, he was still pretty much playing the same game, and he could perfect and refine this low speed, low RPM, low impact game. But the circumstances of Sunday do not care about any of that stuff. They don't care about what you did. They just care about how you execute on Sunday. Now, we are still in the middle of a pandemic. The organizers of the Super Bowl have said, we feel good having 22,000 people at Raymond James Stadium watching this game in the middle of a pandemic. But they've also said it's okay because we want to give back to the community. So we're going to find 7,500 healthcare workers who have been vaccinated and bring them to the game too. Meghan McPeak, how do we feel about halfway packing the stadium in what is the first and hopefully the only pandemic Super Bowl?
I do not feel good about it, to be honest. As you said, we are still in a pandemic. And the Super Bowl is taking place in one of the states that has consistently had upticks in cases, in positive tests, in lack of caring for other human beings' well-being, by not masking, by continuing to eat inside, by not following protocol, by not actually implementing any protocol. But that's a whole other story for another day that I'm sure we'll probably have. I hope, as you said, this is the first, only, and last pandemic Super Bowl or pandemic championship of any nature that we ever see. I don't like it, vaccinated or not, of those 7,500 healthcare workers. Yes, I understand it is their decision to ultimately go or not. At the same time, we don't know everything that has to do with this vaccine and the vaccines that they have. We don't know how long you should be, clear of anybody. We don't know how it happens if you happen to, attend a Super Bowl spreader event. We don't know the other 14,000 people that will also be in attendance if they have been vaccinated, if that is a mandatory portion to get a ticket to the Super Bowl. So while those 7,500 are safe, what about the other 14,500 people that will be in attendance? Not only those people, but also to the athletes that they'll be around, the ushers, the security people in the stadium, the concession stand workers that are now essential workers. What about all of those folks? What are we doing to keep them safe? Why do we need to have fans at this game in that situation? And at that high of a number, if you're going to have fans, it should just be healthcare workers that are vaccinated, period, end of sentence. You should not have an extra 14,500 that we do or don't know have been vaccinated. That's what we don't know. There's been nothing said if those other 14,000, as I mentioned, are vaccinated or not. So if you're going to have 22,000 people, find 22,000 healthcare workers and give them a break, because they have been fighting this pandemic for nearly a year, and there is no letting up.
Well, absolutely. And, all of the guidance I've seen about how to proceed after you've been vaccinated is keep doing what you've been doing. Keep isolating, keep washing your hands, stay away from other people, limit travel until a critical mass of the population has been vaccinated, and then you can start returning to normalish. But what the NFL is saying is, you guys have your shots, come on down. The rest of y'all, we don't know if you got your shots, and we really don't care. Come on down, because we think it makes a better TV product with 22,000 people in the stands. Or maybe we need the ticket revenue, which, again, if you need it that bad, then I have questions about how sound your business is going forward. And I don't imagine they're charging the 7,500 healthcare workers market rate tickets for this, for market rate prices for these tickets. And so that money's going somewhere. So I don't buy the money argument either. And so what it looks like is an argument again made to enhance the TV product, which I guess is fine. But this far into the pandemic, we've figured out ways to make live sports look good with half a stadium, a third of a stadium, a tenth of a stadium, or no fans. So you guys are the NFL. You guys are smart. Go figure it out. Dave, what do you think about this?
This is really bad. I mean, there is no more powerful cultural megaphone, I would argue, in the country than the National Football League. And they're sending a message to the country that if you've gotten your shots, come on in. The world is safe. Not just the Super Bowl is safe, but the world is safe. Like, right. Look, they're here because they got their vaccinations. And I'm just talking about the frontline workers. So I think it's a terrible message to send out to the country. And also, it is an opportunity to point out, as Meghan said, that, Florida is a swamp of corruption and disease. And that's the way it is on good days. That's the way it was in 2018, 2019. And all of this has been exposed during the COVID outbreak. I mean, Florida is such a wealthy state, and it has the fourth most deaths in the country, 1.8 million cases. This is not a poor state that lacks the healthcare infrastructure. This is a state of just savage inequalities. 7% of the population lives on less than 10 grand a year. And you have a governor in Ron DeSantis who behaves like they all signed up for the same death cult. And now they're also, trying to get the Tokyo Olympics to come to Florida. I mean, they're just on this feeding frenzy of let's have as many mega events here as possible because we're not scared of COVID. And I hate that formulation because it's a virus. It's not a troll who lives under the bridge.
Yes.
And so I think that it's absolutely irresponsible by the National Football League. And frankly, shame on them because, with great power comes great responsibility, and they're not exercising that.
Also, fear has nothing to do. Go ahead, Meghan.
How are they getting the healthcare workers there? Are you paying for charter flights for them? Are you paying for private jets? Or are you now telling them, hey, you have to pay for your flight and it's got to be commercial?
Right. Go to the airport, swim with all the fish, and hopefully you don't get exposed to the virus while you're down there. And it's a 95% chance you won't get sick unless you come across the new variant. Then it's a 77% chance. But come on down anyway because it's safe. Also, Dave, there's a big difference between being scared of something and just acting like you have sense.
Exactly.
When I get in my car every morning, I'm not scared I'm going to crash, but I still press the brakes. Like, those are two different things. I don't just roll through red lights saying I'm not scared to crash. No, I still use the brakes. And that's why I'm not scared to crash, because I act like I have sense. So if you're not scared of the virus, perfect. Don't be scared, but wear your mask, stay away from people, limit your movements, follow the guidelines. It's not that difficult. But what we do here at the tail end of every episode is wrestle with some very, very, very difficult questions. We got 3 of them teed up for in and out. First one, anthem singers at the Super Bowl. Jasmine Sullivan and Eric Church, who I think is some type of country singer. I actually have never heard of this person. I have heard of Jasmine Sullivan. What that does tell you is at the end, the NFL is like, they're following social media because her recent Tiny Desk concert went viral. So the NFL said, get us her. So these two, Jasmine Sullivan, Eric Church, are singing the national anthem at the Super Bowl. The prop bets, the guys who set the lines on the prop bets, have set the over-under on the length of the anthem at 2 minutes. Dave Zirin, are you in or out on Jasmine Sullivan and Eric Church completing this anthem in less than 2 minutes?
This is the easiest bet for the entire Super Bowl. And people literally should take my advice, mortgage their homes, raise their college funds, and bet on this. This will be over 2 minutes because I researched this. And Eric Church is not a big voice guy. He is a self-described song stylist. There are country singers with pipes. He's not one of them. Jasmine Sullivan, meanwhile, will blast you into outer space. Now, I don't know how they are going to arrange these two disparate pieces together. And obviously, that's someone in the NFL marketing circle had some idea of, the country's so divided. Let's ebony and ivory this thing up close with 2 different genres. And, I get the feeling, though, they picked these names out of a hat somewhat because their styles are so different. But either way, for them to actually make room for one another and the different ways in which they perform, I think you got to go over 2 minutes on this one.
Okay, that's a bold bet. That's a bold bet. Meghan McPeak, you in or out on this couple, on this pair, on this duo, completing this anthem in less than 2 minutes?
I'm out. It's going over 2 minutes, just slightly over 2 minutes. And I think the way they get as close to 2 minutes as possible, because I'm with Dave, this is a really easy bet. Always go over on the anthem because there's a better chance that it's going to go over than it's going to go under. The only way that they get under 2 minutes is if he's just strumming on the guitar and that's his that's what he gives to the performance, and Jasmine Sullivan, sings. That's, I think, in my opinion, the only way they get it under 2 minutes, because her pipes will carry. She will give you the performance. He's just got to strum along, and if it's a quick little melody, that's how they get it under 2 minutes. If they're gonna try and chime together and play off of each other, this thing's going over 2 minutes. So it really depends on how they flow this together, but I'm with Dave. Always go over on the anthem singers because you will probably win your money.
Let me ask you guys this, since you guys seem to know something about Eric Church, does he play the guitar?
He strums.
I assume all country singers play the guitar when it comes to, at least when it comes to the male side, because that's been my experience of watching male singers of the country genre on television.
So
we're at the 30th anniversary of Whitney Houston's iconic performance.
Yes.
And when I think of Jasmine Sullivan and Eric Church, I think about what if Whitney Houston had gone out there and they'd been like, and George Strait. And he'd come out there too with his guitar. How bizarre that would have been, and how this iconic moment then becomes the sort of thing they're playing on like pop-up video or something. And I think we're headed towards something similar in this case.
This could
going to be an interesting stew of music.
This could become the national anthem equivalent of the Accidental Racist with LL Cool J and the Country Guy. So for that reason, I'm taking the under. I'm in on them finishing in less than 2 minutes, because it might be a case where each of these two realize that they got to hold their nose and get through this as quickly as possible with as few mistakes and as few glitches as possible. Also, they lip sync these things. They record them beforehand. So whether or not this thing lasts more than 2 minutes is already determined. So I'm taking the under. Jasmine Sullivan was singing by herself, we'd have a 5-minute anthem, but she's not singing by herself. It's going to be 1 minute, 58 seconds. Now, the NFL has also hired Amanda Gorman, who stole the show at the inauguration, the poet laureate of the inauguration. The NFL has commissioned her to write a poem and perform a poem before the Super Bowl. And so, Meghan McPeak, are you in or out on the NFL hitching itself to Amanda Gorman? Are you in or out on the idea that a poet should lend their artistic heft to something as crass as the Super Bowl? You in or out?
I am in on Amanda Gorman. If anyone can, spice up the Super Bowl super spreader event, it would be her. She will be so eloquent in the way she delivers this. She's a performer at the same time as being a poet, in my opinion. But I am also in on the fact the NFL, given what we just spoke about a few minutes ago with them bringing 22,000 people unvaccinated to the Super Bowl, with the exception of the healthcare workers, they need something good to come out of this. And that will probably be Amanda Gorman.
Perfect. Dave, you in or out?
I want to answer that question after the poem, because to be clear, I'm all in on her doing it. I'm all in on the NFL asking her to do it. I'm all for people of conscience using the platforms that these corporations provide as a way to speak out and tell some truth. But if she delivers like an ode to a Bud Light, that's not gonna be great. If she does her tribute to head injuries, that's not going to be great. So to me, we know she has all the talent in the world. It's like, I'm curious in how she uses that talent on that particular platform. And, if she brings it like we saw at the inauguration, then I think it'll be fantastic. If she gets out there instead and tells me that I need to get Geico, it's not going to be.
Well, it's tough because I had ever since I learned that this was happening, again, I'm picturing Amanda Gorman, poor Amanda Gorman, sitting at her desk, squeezing her temples, racking her brain, trying to come up with a poem about football. It's not an easy thing to do. And you can point out, like, correctly, well, would Gwendolyn Brooks write a poem for the Super Bowl? Probably not. Would Paul Lawrence Dunbar write a poem for the Super Bowl? Probably not. But we're in a different era, first of all. Second of all, what was the poem, the title of the poem that Amanda Gorman performed at the inauguration? The Hill We Climb, right? Which could very well be an ode to who? Walter Payton. Walter Payton, sweetness, right? Who would get ready for every season running up that big hill in North Suburban Chicago. This girl's ready. This woman is ready to write about some football. And as long as the NFL is throwing around money to people, somebody's going to get that money. It might as well be Amanda Gorman, because it's not like poets are like super famous in society. It's not like poets have a ton of opportunities to cash in. I don't know if she swore an oath of penury, before she embarked on this career as a poet. Go get paid, Amanda Gorman, and write the best football poem you can. Last one, Scotty Miller, wide receiver, slot receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Fast guy, has been claiming that he is faster than Tyreek Hill, who, just for some perspective, Scotty Miller, his personal best in 100 meters is 10.53 seconds. Tyreek Hill's personal best is 10.19 seconds. And if you don't think 0.3 of a second is a significant gap in the 100 meters, you need to watch more races, because 0.3 of a second might as well be a week. But Scotty Miller is still claiming that he is faster than Tyreek Hill. And we in the mainstream media have taken him on at this and are giving him like credulous press coverage, even though he's demonstrably slower. Dave Zirin, are you in or out on sports media picking up stories like this?
Oh, I'm so out on it, because for the simple reason that we're living in a time where people are making their fame based on lies. And that's not just in sports, that's in all of society. So, anybody can go out there and say stuff. And if it gets picked up and if it gets you clout, then so be it. So I'm against lying for clout, which is what Scotty Miller's doing. I mean, I have a better chance of beating Scotty Miller in a race than Scotty Miller Tyreek Hill in a race. Am I lying? I don't know. Let's go to SI.com and see if they pick up the story. See, so I'm much more about the media being arbiters of what I would refer to as objective truth, not opinion, but objective truth. And objectively, Scotty Miller needs to, in the words of The Rock, know his role and shut his mouth.
Jabroni.
Wait, so can we set up a race between you and Scotty Miller?
Good. I might pull a Mike Johnson.
That's fun. All you gotta do is make it to the start line. Meghan McPeak, you in or out?
I'm out. First of all, your nickname is Scooter. His is Cheetah. What are you talking about? Like, and why are we even giving him this attention? Like, is it that the biggest annoyance for me is the 2-week lead up to the Super Bowl, because they will talk about anything and everything, and a lot of the everything has no credence to be spoken about on any type of platform. This is hilarious to me. He just wants some attention, and I'm sorry, but no, your nickname is Scooter. Stay in your lane.
Now, Scott Miller, in his defense, is a fast guy. You don't see a ton of people running 10.5 seconds in the 100 meters. When you see that person on an NFL field, that person is pretty fast. You look at Jonathan Taylor from Indianapolis. He's a 10.5 sprinter. Our man Chuba Hubbard, who we talk about all the time, is a 10.5 sprinter. Like, that is serious speed. It's just not high school Tyreek Hill speed. So I am in on the idea that the NFL crowd is now having to swallow the medicine it dispenses to the track nerds all the time, because every year the NFL nerds tell us that somebody's 40 time at the combine makes him faster than Christian Coleman, faster than Usain Bolt. And they will sit there with a straight face and argue it with you, and you try to tell them, and you try to combat it with facts, and they're not trying to hear it. So now here comes Scotty Miller saying, I'm faster than Usain Bolt. In the mainstream media, it becomes a debate point, but the NFL dudes are like, there's no way this guy's faster. And I'm like, well, how do you think the track nerds feel when you tell us that 14 defensive backs in the NFL are all faster than the fastest man in the world? So I'm in on NFL experts, NFL pundits, again, swallowing the same medicine that they dispense every year at the NFL Combine. But I'm all the way out on the mainstream sports media. And this is like a serious problem. This is like a enjoyable kind of harmless manifestation of a really serious problem in sport, in not just in sports media, in media overall. It's just taking people at their word just because, and acting like there are two good faith sides to every story, because the stats will tell you who's faster. And Tyreek Hill is faster at the 40-yard dash, which is the only stat football nerds care about, even though it doesn't really measure top. It does not measure top speed. He's faster at the 100 meters, which is the actual measure of who is fastest, and he's faster at 200 meters. And at each of these intervals, the gap between him and Scotty Miller gets wider and wider and wider. So there really is nothing to debate, but we make it something to debate. And we keep drilling home these messages until people start thinking they're true. Start thinking that the demonstrably slower guy might be faster if you look at it from the right angle. Start thinking that the NFL guys might be faster than the Olympic guys. And like, none of this is true. And so this example is pretty harmless, but we do this on climate change, on white nationalists, on the Democrats are crooked too. Look at Joe Biden. He has a Peloton and a Rolex. We do this all the time. And it's dangerous, dangerous, dangerous. This example is fun, but if we don't correct it here, it does bleed into other areas of coverage. Thankfully, I am a football nerd, as you can tell by the 2 or 3 trophies on the wall here, but I am a track and field nerd, as you can tell by this poster on the wall behind me. One of those women is my wife. I'll let you guys guess who. And so when it comes to this,
alert, the one leading the pack.
Exactly. So when it comes to stuff like this, I actually do have a good idea of who's faster than whom and why, and which numbers to trust. The numbers we got to trust around here are the viewership numbers, which hopefully are going to keep climbing. The number of likes and even dislikes, we take all engagements, so they all matter. Number of comments. If you like what you're hearing, leave a comment, leave a like. If you don't like what you're hearing, leave a comment, leave a dislike. We don't mind. All engagements matter. So you can subscribe to us here on YouTube, follow us on social media at CBC Sports. Meghan is at Meghan McPeak. David is at Edge of Sports. I'm at Morgan P. Campbell. We will see you guys next week with more Bring It In with Morgan Campbell.